In this presentation, I'll be discussing the expository essay, the parts that make it up, the process of writing, and the particulars of citations, and a plan to ensure its completion. An expository essay is a written piece designed to inform or to explain a topic by providing relevant details, facts, and information. With it, one exposes these details, facts, or information, thus expository or to expose. A prompt for an essay will come in one of four types, specifically the expository essay: either definition, cause and effect, process, or opposing ideas. We'll discuss these four types after looking at the individual parts of the organization of the essay. Here we have a diagram that represents the major parts that join together to create the essay. The triangle at the top represents the beginning or introduction. It will open with what we refer to as a hook, and it will end with what we call a thesis, represented by this bright, shiny red star. Since the thesis is the most important sentence in the essay, think of it as the star of the show. Everything else in the essay is there to serve that sentence. The four rectangles in the diagram represent the body of the essay, where the thesis is supported with evidence. For purposes of this essay, you'll probably have anywhere from 3 to 5 supporting paragraphs. Now, the triangle at the bottom represents the end or conclusion paragraph of the essay. And that's where you remind your reader of the point of the writing. So, the hook smoothly introduces your thesis. The four body paragraphs, or 3 to 5 body paragraphs in your case, support your thesis. And the conclusion restates your thesis and extends it a step further with a strong statement to provoke thought or to show how it can be applied in real life. Now, let's look further at the four types of expository essays that we referred to earlier. And we use those to identify the individual parts of the organization of the first or introductory paragraph. The definition essay provides the full explanation of a term or idea, keyword being explanation. It could also provide an explanation of what a term or idea is not. Here we'll look at the introductory paragraph of a definition essay about the flu virus. In it, we should find everything we need to know about what the entire essay will cover. Let's read this introduction paragraph. One of the most common illnesses around the world is the flu, understood by very few people. The flu season generally occurs between the months of December and March. People get it a few times a year, and it's usually not fatal, but symptoms can and usually do plague days and sometimes weeks with confining and monotonous misery. It's vital to understand the basics of the virus, its symptoms, complications, how it spreads, and its period of contagiousness. This knowledge can help us avoid the dangers of the flu. Now, the introduction can be split into three parts: the hook, background information, and the thesis statement. The hook is almost always the first sentence in the paragraph. Its purpose is to grab the attention of the reader. Many students will use a question for this purpose. And while that's acceptable, it's overused, and I'd highly recommend you do something, maybe a strong statement or a surprising fact. The hook in this introductory paragraph is here. One of the most common illnesses around the world is understood by very few people. After you've engaged the reader with a good hook sentence, you'll want to give the reader some background information in order to assist them in understanding the topic. The background information could be context, like who, where, when. It could also be a brief history of the topic, a controversy surrounding the topic, or a statement or two that emphasizes its importance. In this example, the background information is here. Flu season generally occurs between the months of December and March. People get it a few times a year, and it's usually not fatal, but symptoms can and usually do plague days and sometimes weeks with confining and monotonous misery. Now it's time for the thesis, which again is the single most important sentence of the essay, a factual topic conveying the main idea or reason for your essay. In this introduction paragraph, the thesis is here. This knowledge can help us avoid the dangers of the flu. A cause effect essay explains the relationship between two or more events. It may identify an event and explore the possible effects of it, or it may consider something that has happened or the effects and then try to explain its causes. Here we'll look at the introductory paragraph of a cause effect essay about the effect of video games on the mind. In it, we should find everything we need to know, once again, about what the entire essay will cover. Let's read this introduction paragraph. We all know that video games affect our attention, but little is discussed about exactly how or why. A Chinese study on focused attention in expert and non expert video game players showed that after playing a specified popular video game for about 1 hour, both groups experienced improved visual selective attention. A similar study showed the brain activity of the non experts increased to the point of being comparable to the experts. Thus, tests show that playing video games increases the selective visual attention, though that effect might only be temporary. The hook in this introduction paragraph is here. We all know that video games affect our attention, but little is discussed about exactly how or why. The background information is here. A Chinese study on focused attention in expert and non expert video game players showed that after playing a specified popular video game for about 1 hour, both groups experienced improved visual selective attention. A similar study showed that the brain activity of the non experts increased to the point of being comparable to the experts. And the thesis statement is here. Thus, tests show that playing video games increases selective visual attention, though that effect might only be temporary. A process essay provides a description of how something works or an explanation of how to do something. It could take the form of detailed instructions or a chronological accounting of events. Here we'll look at the introductory paragraph of a process essay about the history and development of Instagram. And in it, we should find, once again, everything we need to know about what the entire essay will cover. Let's read this introduction paragraph. Instagram attracts all different types of users, but it especially is popular with teenagers and those below 40 years. The origins of Facebook can be traced back to 2003, and 8 years later, along came an up and coming social network favorite, Instagram. As young people migrate away from Facebook, they're gathering mostly on Instagram and more picture based platforms. In order to fully understand the importance of this application, it would be useful to know its history and how it developed. The hook in this introduction paragraph is here. Instagram attracts all different types of users, but it especially is popular with teenagers and those below 40 years old. And the background information, excuse me, is here. The origins of Facebook can be traced back to 2003, and 8 years later, along came an up and coming social network favorite, Instagram. As young people migrate away from Facebook, they're gathering mostly on Instagram and more picture based platforms. And then, of course, the thesis is here. In order to fully understand the importance of this application, it would be useful to know its history and how it developed. An opposing ideas essay presents two or more sides of an issue. The goal is not to argue for one side or the other. That would be called an argumentative or a persuasive essay. but it is rather to fairly present the major points of view about a topic. It's useful for informing the reader about a controversy so that they can better understand why the opposing sides disagree. Here, we'll look at the introductory paragraph of an opposing ideas essay about public education versus the homeschooling model. And in it, we should be able to find everything we need to know about what the entire essay will cover. Let's read this introductory paragraph. An increasing percentage of parents in the U.S. are choosing to homeschool their children. The reasons for this include concerns with ideological agendas, wasteful school hours, and negative peer influences. Opposers of the homeschool model claim that parents aren't qualified, the curriculum is often substandard, and homeschooled children lack the social skills necessary to survive and thrive in society. A greater understanding of both options, public versus homeschool education, will increase the chances that parents will make informed decisions when it comes to their children's education. The hook in this introduction paragraph is here. An increasing percentage of parents in the U.S. are choosing to homeschool their children. The background information is here. The reasons for this include concerns with ideological agendas, wasteful school hours, and negative peer influences. Opposers of the homeschool model claim that parents aren't qualified, the curriculum is often substandard, and homeschooled children lack the social skills necessary to survive and thrive in society. And then, of course, the thesis statement, which is here. A greater understanding of both options, public versus homeschool education, will increase the chances that parents will make informed decisions when it comes to their children's education. Now that we've carefully looked at the introductory paragraphs of these 4 essays, let's move on to the body paragraphs using just one of the essays. The body paragraphs follow the introduction paragraph. As I stated earlier, for purposes of this assignment, you'll probably write from 3 to 5 body paragraphs. And these are meant to support the thesis with development using what? Explanations, evidence from sources, expert opinions, details, and examples. Let's go back to our first sample essay, the definition expository about the flu virus, and examine its body paragraphs. Notice that within the introduction paragraph, the writer of this essay informed us of the specific topics, or subtopics, I should say, that will be discussed. Basics of the virus, symptoms of the virus, complications of the virus, means of contagiousness, and period of contagiousness. So there are 5 body paragraphs that support the thesis of the essay, which is this knowledge can help us avoid the dangers of the flu. Let's look at each of those body paragraphs. Paragraph 2 covers the basics of the virus. Paragraph 3 covers the symptoms of the virus. Paragraph 4 covers the complications of the virus. Paragraph 5 covers the means of contagiousness. And paragraph 6 covers the period of contagiousness. Feel free to read from each of these if you would like to. Now, after you've written a strong series of body paragraphs, it's time to write your concluding paragraph. In the conclusion paragraph, you'll remind the reader of the topic and you'll paraphrase or restate your thesis. Don't use the exact words that you used in the introduction. Restating your thesis in the closing is like closing a deal. You're saying, so after all this, you can see that my thesis is true, right? Then summarize your main points, assuming that the reader has a very short memory. By summarizing the main points, you're reminding your reader of the main ideas that you presented. And finally, you'll end with a strong statement, like what you started the essay with. In other words, you'll end with a final comment. Consider adding something that broadens the significance of your topic, why it matters, why it's significant. Another way to end is by giving a call to action, informing the reader of all that they should do given this new information that they now have. Let's read the conclusion paragraph of our essay on the virus. As we have seen, the flu is a respiratory illness that is caused by the extremely adaptable and variable influenza virus. It has a variety of symptoms such as coughing, runny nose, chills, and more. A flu can bring on complications as well, like infections and inflammation, if one is not careful enough. The virus itself is exchanged through a host, releasing it in liquid form by sneezing, coughing, and other methods. Lastly, the period of contagiousness is between 24 hours to 4 days. The basic information about the flu can help us ward against the danger of this common illness. Taking action based upon this information can help to avoid the confining and monotonous misery that the flu can bring. Now, in this conclusion, the writer has fulfilled all the requirements necessary for an effective concluding paragraph. Reminding the reader of the topic, restate or paraphrase the thesis statement, summarize the main points, and make a strong statement at the very end. Source acknowledgement is important. As a college student, you've heard this many times, so I won't lecture you on it, but suffice it to say, it's about honesty. Don't write something from a source and then claim it as yours. Honestly, instructors would much rather see a paper kindled by quotes and in text citations than a paper plagued or plaqued by plagiarism. You like the way I use that alliteration there, kindled by quotes and plaqued and plagued by plagiarism. But anyway, I digress. In other words, it's much more impressive that you took the time to find sources that that it is that you took the time to paraphrase something or to use a phrase or a quote that's common and doesn't require a citation. That said, if there is any doubt in your mind as to whether you should cite a source, cite the source. And you'll want to check out Purdue's MLA Formatting and Style Guide. I've placed the link on this Canvas page. Okay, when citing sources within your essay, thus in text sources, the author's last name must appear either in the sentence that you cite or in the parentheses at the end. You can't simply show the page number at the end and leave out the author's name. Let's look at 4 examples of how this can be done correctly. Notice that the author's name, Lewis, is included in my statement. So I'll only place the page number at the end of the quote. Okay, it says, about this dilemma, Lewis says, quote, to make such a weighty decision based on pure emotion is foolish. 74. Now let's look at another way to do this. Quote, to make such a weighty decision based on pure emotion is foolish. Lewis, 74. In this, I've used the quote from Lewis's book, word for word, and I've placed his name in the in-text citation. If you don't want to use a direct quotation, but you're still conveying information that you've paraphrased or put into your own words, you still need to cite it. So here I still have the author's name and page number. The only difference is that I don't need quotation marks since I'm not using the exact quote from the author. Here, I've done the same thing. That is, I've paraphrased the author's quote, but I haven't used his name in my paraphrased version. So what do I need? Well, I need to make sure that I include his name somewhere so it goes in the citation. And in all these examples, I've placed the period after the parentheses. I recommend that you mix up the way you do this because using the same method throughout your work can get redundant. Using website sources is now, as you know, very common. Here are a few things to know. Don't use an online article as a source if you can't find the name of the author. Next, with online sources, you're not required to give paragraph numbers or page numbers, especially since there aren't page numbers, right? And thirdly, don't give full URLs for in text citations. We save that for the bibliography at the end. For in text, if you've named the author in your comment, simply give the title of the article in quotation marks and surround it with parentheses and place the period after the parentheses. Here's an example. Now, if you don't mention the author's name in your comment, but rather paraphrase the author's quote, simply use the author's last name in parentheses followed by a period. And it should look like this. There are a couple of style points that I would like to discuss. First, if you're including a quote that is 5 or more lines long, you'll need to indent it by simply pressing your tab key and placing the punctuation, usually a period, before the parenthetical citation. Here's an example. This blue line represents that margin of your paper that's set by your word processor, and the arrow shows that I've indented the entire quote. Make sure that you don't include quotation marks, since indenting the quotation indicates that it is a quote. When your instructor sees an indented chunk of text like this, they know that it's a quote from a source. And again, place the punctuation at the end of the quote rather than after the in-text citation. The second point is this: if you add a word or words to a quote, usually for clarification purposes, place those words in brackets. Here's an example. In this case, I've added the words, quote, access to a medical facility. I did that so that the reader is clear as to what exactly it is. So I used this added information for clarification purposes, and I made sure that I placed it in brackets. Now let's discuss the works cited page, also referred to as the bibliography. When composing your MLA works cited page, here are a few things to keep in mind. First, the works cited page is an altogether new page, so you want to make sure that nothing else is seen on that page. Also, make sure to type the words works cited at the top, right in the center. Everything past the first line of entries should be indented by 5 spaces or a ½ inch from the margin. The purpose for this is to make the author's name or names stand out, as we see here: Duda, Graff, CG, and Smith. And make sure that your works cited page is alphabetized by author last name. By the way, I've circled the title Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress in red just to remind you that now, which this is a fairly new rule, the names of books or titles of books are no longer underlined but are italicized. Now, you're going to want to write a good essay, of course. And to do so, you're going to have a plan. You have 4 weeks to complete the essay. What follows is a suggested schedule. Keep in mind that the number of days could change based on instructor discretion, so keep your eyes peeled for announcements. Now, this is merely a suggested plan, of course, and you may choose to alter the number of days per category, but suffice it to say, a logically, carefully considered plan that matches your particular life and your particular schedule is vital. It is crucial. You must have a plan. And there you have it. The expository essay, the parts that make it up, the process of writing it, the particulars of citations, and a plan to ensure its completion. Thanks for listening, and good luck.